Something a viewer mentioned in the comments made me think about a question that wasn't exactly what they suggested in the comment, but it did make me think a lot about this question. It's been swirling around in my brain for several days now, so I thought I would just take some time and noodle on it with you. Is hiking elitist? I'd like to do something a little different today and think about the question of whether hiking is elitist. And if it is, what do we do about it? Now, first off, I realize that maybe this is a question that would be better put to you through a live chat, but I have not done a live stream before. So if you would like to participate in a live stream with me and talk about some of the kind of deeper questions that revolve around hiking, through hiking, adventures, van life, all of that, let me know down in the comments and I will take your input into consideration. So now to the question at hand. I know in my experience, and I can remember as plain as day when I first started hiking and contemplating through hiking, it was a really scary proposition because I think I did feel like I didn't belong to the hiking community. So when I ask the question of is hiking elitist, I'm talking about through hikers, I'm talking about day hikers, section hikers, lashers, anybody who is involved in the hiking community, and is there some sort of elitism around just hiking, And it's not just like, do you have to be rich to hike? That was one of the questions that was put to me. Somebody assumed that my family is like a 60-year-old boat. I don't know how old it was, 55-year-old boat, that we still enjoy sailing, that somehow meant that I came from a wealthy family. And if you watch some of my other videos about some of my struggles and my upbringing, then you know that that is not the case. But at the same time, it was interesting to me that somebody would jump to that conclusion and say, oh, well, of course you can go hike. You come from a wealthy family, and I don't. There is a lot of, to me, not necessarily elitism, but there is a lot of showing off overt, if not wealth, overt expenses around hiking and through hiking. I mean, when you look at new gear, the prospect of buying a backpack, you're confronted with something that's probably going to be at least $200, if not $350, $400, or sometimes even more for a good quality backpack you're buying new. So that automatically rules out a lot of people, at least in their minds. And you might be one of them who are like, dang, I can't do that. Where am I going to get that money when I can barely make ends meet? And I know that this is timely because the economy that we're in right now, with the stock market taking a dive and a lot of uncertainty, that, even if you do have money in the bank, you might be really loath to spend it because you don't know what's coming up next. There's that question of like all of this gear that so many of us are obsessed with, and I admit that I sometimes am obsessed with gear as well, is not cheap. So does that mean that hiking is elitist? Does that mean that we're, by definition, excluding people who can't afford that gear? I know I personally believe in being able to hike on a budget, whether it's through hiking or day hiking or anything. I think that it's really important that people have access to gear, no matter what their budget or financial circumstances are. So that's why I've done videos on how to backpack on a budget, how to find cheap gear, and you can see a link to one of those up here. But does that make it elitist? Does that mean that people out there, and you might be one of them, just feel like I can never be a part of this community because I don't have the resources? So there's the financial elitism that maybe is out there, and I really do want to hear from you on whether you think that's the case, or if you've ever even experienced it for yourself, like I did early on, like, yeah, I don't know if I can do this. Because I bought my first backpacking kit for the AT as cheap as possible. I got back practically everything from REI garage sales at like 70% off because I just didn't want to spend the money. I didn't have the money, and yeah, it wasn't an option for me. If you go out on the trail or you watch through hiking videos, or videos of people doing van life adventures, where they were driving around in a Sprinter van that cost well over $100,000, $200,000, what does that say to people who want to do the same thing? And if they're wearing, Patagucci, we all, joke about Patagucci, right? Patagonia, or whatever the brand of the day is. And some of the new through hiking gear, even when it comes from cottage companies, is not cheap. And I understand why it's not cheap, because it is expensive to do product development. It is expensive to make products. But at the same time, that might preclude a lot of people, or at least give them the impression that they can't participate because they can't afford gear like that. So there's the financial aspect of it, which is definitely something I would like to hear from you about. But then there's the attitude that I see among some people of like, well, if you're not experienced, then you're not one of us. Or if you're not experienced, then what are you doing out here? You see somebody showing up to a trailhead and they don't have the right gear. And are we as hikers looking at those people and making them feel like they need to just pack up and go home because they don't have the experience, because they don't know what they don't know? I certainly hope that I never make anybody feel that way. But then at the same time, when you get in your groove and you're doing your thing, maybe sometimes inadvertently that would happen. Like somebody looks at you and they're like, oh, they have all this experience and I don't. So does that mean that I don't belong to the hiker community? I would hope that we don't do that. It doesn't matter if it's inclusivity related to hiking experience or background or socioeconomic status or even things like health. Those are things where I think people could very easily be feeling excluded from the hiking community because, and I hear this a lot from people on my channel, it's like, man, I would love to go do that, but physically I can't. And for those of you who've made comments like that in the past, let me know, does that mean that you feel like you don't belong to the community at all, or that there's no place in the hiking community for you? Because if that's the case, then that's a conversation that we should have, is how can we help people who have a different level of abilities than some people who can go out and triple crown, not everybody can do that. What can we do to make things more inclusive from the standpoint of physical abilities? And I know there's a lot of trails, and I love to do videos about in-town trails because they're accessible. They're accessible from the standpoint that you can hop in your car and drive 5 or 10 minutes from home and find a cool trail and feel like you're out in nature as if you drove 2 hours. Those kind of trails are amazing, and they are there for everybody. So I love seeing that. On the AT, there's at least one stretch that is wheelchair accessible, which I think is another super, super cool thing, because how awesome would it be if you're confined to a wheelchair to be able to get out on the AT and be like, I didn't do the whole thing, but I did part of it, and I had some of that AT experience, and I'm entitled to that just like anybody else is. So that I think is really important. I know as a creator, it's really easy to make videos that focus on the exceptional things that people can do and the things that are kind of aspirational, of like, someday I want to do this, someday I want to be fit enough, someday I want to have the resources, whatever it might be. Hello, buddy. In general, YouTube creators chase views. They want to get sponsor deals. They want to get more subscribers. Some people beg for subscribers much more blatantly than others. But if you want to make any kind of money, even if it's just enough money to compensate for your time that you invest into creating videos, then you're going to tend to look at what are people watching, what are people responding to, and make more videos like that. And oftentimes that is, traveling, going to places like, oh, I went to Scotland, I went to Nepal, I went to, Patagonia, all of those kind of things can make other people feel left out if they don't feel comfortable traveling, if they're scared to travel, if they don't have a passport and they can't go anywhere, or if they don't have the money. I mean, there's a lot of reasons that people could be watching those videos that are very aspirational, and maybe you love those, even if that's something that you're watching and you're never going to do it. That could be a thing, right? That's probably is a thing. So maybe you love those kind of videos and they don't make you feel like you're not part of the community, but I'd be very curious if it's kind of off-putting. If you see all these videos of people going places that you never expect to go or never plan to go, and you'd rather have somebody just tell you, what can I do if I've only got, 4 days to go hike somewhere and I want to have a great time backpacking and camping with my friends? Is that less elitist, I suppose, than, going to all this exotic travel? I don't know. And again, it's a question that has been kind of swirling around my brain, and I've been thinking, okay, when you think about elitist, is that just financial? Is it ableist? Is it education? Do you feel like you have to be more educated to hike? I don't think so. I did have some experiences with a hiking club that I joined where there were people who not only were dressed up in all the fancy hiking clothes for a day hike, but they were also kind of looking askance at people who didn't seem to fit the mold of what they thought hikers should look like. And that made me somewhat uncomfortable. And so, yeah, all those questions. I know I'm rambling. Let me just think for a minute and see if there's a way I can be more concise about that. I definitely have had experiences where I have felt like I was not part of the community, either because I wasn't hiking fast enough, or I didn't have the right clothes, or the right gear, or, all of those kind of things. It's like, But there are also times when I've had people who are like, maybe they're older and they're retirees and they have all the time in the world to hike. and they look at a harried mom who just wants to get out for a day hike in the middle of the week, and they're like, well, what are they doing out here, you know? Or maybe it's the opposite. Maybe it's somebody who's out trail running, and they're like, I'm fit, I've done a marathon, you know, I'm going to go do, you know, a 13er tomorrow or a 14er in Colorado, and I'm going to hike these big mountains. And, you know, you're old, you can't do that. And I hate to say that I have started experiencing this, but as you get older, there's this phenomenon of sometimes becoming invisible. And some people, as they get older, view that as a superpower because they can just sit back and kind of watch and observe and learn a lot from being cloaked in invisibility. So that's a good thing. But there's also the invisibility for older folks of like just not being acknowledged, or people assuming that they are not going to be able to climb that hill, or that they're not going to be able to, you know, just do the same things, enjoy the hikes in the same way. They're not going to be able to keep pace with a group, or they're going to get confused, or they're going to get lost, or maybe they are going to get hurt and they're going to hold everybody back if you're hiking as a group. So there's that kind of elitism, that sort of ageist elitism. There's education of like, you know, well, if you don't know how to read a map, then, you know, where you come from, right? And how many people know how to read a map today? I think it's a really valid skill. I've taken map reading classes myself, but at the same time, if somebody doesn't know how to read a map, if they don't know how to wayfind in a trail, then wouldn't it be incumbent upon those of us who do to kind of help them out, to help them along, to help them understand the importance of developing those skills versus making them feel bad because they don't? Yeah, there's just all these questions that are swirling around. And like I said, I'm rambling a bit, but I would love to hear your thoughts on this particular issue. And if you've been in that circumstance before, or if maybe you're on the other side and you do kind of look at certain people and make judgments when you're on the trail and be like, well, what are they doing out here? Shouldn't they be back on that in-town trail that's paved because they're never going to make it to that summit? You know, maybe you think that way. I don't know. And if you do, maybe you feel like it's justified. Or if you do, maybe this is a good chance for you to think, okay, is that really the right way I should be approaching something that should be a very inclusive community? I mean, trails, the outdoors, they're for everybody, right? And hopefully we will continue to protect them. That's an important thing for me. I want to make sure that these green trees and beautiful trails and outdoor places are available for everybody 50 years from now, 100 years from now. But yeah, I want to make sure that I'm never being elitist, and I am curious what your thoughts are on that issue as well. So like I said, please drop your comments down below. We can have further discussion about this. If you think I should do a live stream at some point about this question or some other burning questions that you might have, then just let me know that as well. And please keep it nice. You know, let's not hate on each other. Let's just have a nice, constructive conversation about this topic. And I will look forward to seeing you here again next time.